My name is Rahim Jessani, and welcome to The Unfortunate Truth, collabing with Ismailis Rise Up.
So we are an organization, a community organization that was built to mobilize Ismaili voters and to educate people about voting and to address issues like voter suppression. We brought on organizers through our masterclass. We've had one every month since August, and our organizers then tap into their personal networks and register other Ismailis to vote, get people to vote early, get people to understand their ballot, make a plan to vote. And we do this by educating people on social media. We host events where people can learn about these things. We phone bank regularly. And we even have a line of merch that you can buy.
I've heard this a lot, I don't know about you guys, where people will be like, why does my vote matter? Or they are apolitical, or it doesn't affect me. I'm good at, I'm living in a good state. So what do you say to that?
So probably the best way to respond to that is, I think two ways. Sympathizing and empathizing with them, and then informing them. So when you're empathizing with them, you're kind of going down to their emotions, saying things like, I know you're feeling like your vote doesn't matter, and a lot of people are feeling disheartened, and also appealing to their emotions. So if someone is pretty big on social justice, or if someone is pretty big on general basic human rights, kind of appealing to that, right? Yeah. Like, I know you're aggravated, I know you're frustrated, and the best way for you to voice yourself with probably the least amount of effort is to get out and vote.
Important to note also is that even if somebody lives in a state that's not necessarily a swing state, and they say, okay, well, it doesn't really matter if I vote, that one vote, you're right, it's not going to sway the election. But what you're doing then is you're contributing to a larger number of what your vote represents, right? So let's say that you are part of the Muslim community, like we all are, and your vote then goes to the demographic of Muslim voters, right? And then the larger that number is, the more politicians are going to start to cater towards our needs and, the things that we're asking for as a community will be represented more.
And then kind of informing them on how easy the voting process is, right? Sometimes you take out 20, 30 minutes a day to watch TV that doesn't really stimulate but maybe taking out that 20, 30 minutes to look at your ballot, pull up your sample ballot, do some research on the candidates that are ultimately going to be affecting your life, your quality of life, and you and your neighbors and your family's quality of life, and seeing how their values and how their propositions align with your personal values and your personal ethics. Just to kind of piggyback off of that. So I'll give you an example of a race that happened in Texas that a lot of people have talked about recently. So an Ismaili ran for the Texas legislature, and at the moment, there is not a single South Asian or a single Muslim on the Texas legislature. And my county, Fort Bend County, has been described as the most ethnically diverse county in the nation, with an overwhelming number of South Asian and Muslim voters. And if one like prayer hall of people went and voted for that candidate that lost by 30 something votes, he would have been the first Muslim, first South Asian in Texas legislature. So when people ask, my vote doesn't matter, just those few tiny little votes, you could have had someone that looks like you in your legislature if you could just get to the polls.
Some challenges, and I'm not talking about voter suppression per se. I'm talking about, the ability to even understand the English that is written on it, or to go out. And I'm speaking specifically about people in our older, Jamati, community, people like my dati, of course, who obviously she has me to help her out, but a lot of people, senior citizens, or other people who don't understand, or other people who don't even speak English, right? Or don't understand what's going on in politics. So how do you help them? What's the challenge there per se?
Yeah, so I think you outlined the challenge very well, right? There is a language barrier. It's not that the older segments of our Jamaat do not want to vote. It's just that there may be a barrier in terms of language. And so one of the things that Ismailis Rise Up is doing is, or that we have done, is we've created phone banking scripts that are in different languages. So we've got Hindi and Urdu, we've got Gujarati, Kutchi, Farsi, Dari. So we are trying to break down these language barriers when we get on the phone with somebody who doesn't speak English as their first language. It also builds a connection with the person that you're talking to. You are no longer expecting them to meet you halfway. You are meeting them at their halfway point.
What are you guys doing to try to help with, research the candidates and try to plan for their voting and really that? And especially I want to a little elaborate on maybe judges, right? Because judges are something that's there isn't, because I know parties give out different, sample ballots or something like that. But judges are a little different than that. So what do you guys think about that, or trying to help ease that up?
So, so a couple of things. If you're registered with a party, more often than not, you're going to get a pamphlet coming up to the election with who's running and what their platforms are.
Yeah, of course.
If you're not registered with a party, in case you're nonpartisan, there are a ton of online resources. So I'll walk through what I like to do. Every state is different. So for my state, I would have to go to votetexas.org to find my sample ballot, or votetexas.gov to find my sample ballot. The beauty of election machines is that you're allowed to take a paper with you up to an election machine. So I don't know if this is the same for every single state, but in Texas, I know that that's the case. So in my first few elections, what I would do is I would pull up a website called Ballotopedia. I would pull up my sample ballot right next to me, and just like I do in class, I would take notes from every party policy platform and everything they stood by. I would look for buzzwords in their campaign website. Last, IRU does information sessions. So for California, there's a huge debate on this proposal called Prop 22 that has to do with Uber and their rights as an organization in the state. And it's garnered a ton of attention in the news, even made national headlines. And IRU did a session on educating the Ismaili community on what Prop 22 is. Just information sessions sometimes help you figure out how to vote a certain way.
More than voting, I feel like that. You guys mentioned phone banking. That is one thing. Maybe elaborate a little bit more on the phone banking. But is there or other things in that, right? Especially and regardless of your party, that we can do to have a better democracy. And for me, at least, this is literally the reason why I started the Unfortunate Truth. That is educating other people. Now that isn't as actionable maybe. But at least I think of having a conversation and changing people's minds, not forcing people or not, berating them, of course. But what do you guys think about, that the other ways besides voting that we can help out?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And something that I think all of us are constantly thinking about is, especially as we move forward beyond the election, and it all comes back to education, at least personally, right? Educate yourself. There's so much pressure to do these monumental things all the time, every single day, but you really don't have to do these crazy, outrageous things on a day-to-day basis. It could be as little as educating yourself on something that you have no idea about. If you don't know anything about climate change, go read some climate change articles. Go read about where everyone is getting all of their facts and figures. If you don't know what the Green New Deal is, go read the Green New Deal. It's only 14 pages.
Top of education, kind of touching on what Sanobar had mentioned earlier, where you want to understand both points. when you're educating yourself, don't just educate yourself on the things you want to hear, but the things you need to hear. The things that you might not necessarily understand at first, but they make sense once you continue to read and read and read. Sometimes you understand why people think the way they do. And probably the best way to do that is by talking and by actively. So
Yeah.
You want to be able to hear both sides of the story.
Of course. What's the one thing that you can look at? You looked, if you had, let's say this is your in the Jamaat, this is the Farman time, like this is your one thing that you're talking the entire Jamaat. That what would be that?
For me, it would be that your voice matters and your vote matters, and we as individual members of IRU and as a collective IRU understand that voting is not a perfect system. Our elections are not perfect. They are not the final solution. They're a first step. When we cast our ballot, we are saying this is who we want represented in office. This is who we want to be responsible for the policies and the values that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And after this election, now we're going to work to hold these people accountable. We're going to find better people to represent us. We're going to keep moving forward, because if our election was supposed to be an end all be all, we wouldn't have them every couple of years, right? We are a democracy, and if you do believe that this democracy is worth preserving, then I believe that as immigrants and marginalized voices and people who deserve a spot in this country and a spot to be represented, we have a civic responsibility to engage with that democracy, and that starts with voting.
I would also add, if you believe in democracy, then your quality of life is directly impacted by it. So vote local. This is a huge election. 2016 is a pretty big election, but there are other elections almost every single year that people do not vote in. And those are the elections that literally impact your day-to-day life. Do you hate construction on your street every single week? Vote local. Are you upset with the small business how they take care of small businesses in your city? Vote local. I cannot stress this enough. You are directly impacted by your local policies and your local officials, so vote local.
My final thoughts, is there something that you guys want to talk to the viewers, saying like, what are your next plans, your plan for the next, election's almost here. If you guys want to talk about like promoting something or talk about something that you guys plan on doing these next 2 weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start and then Sanobar, go for whatever you have on your mind, but we have a voting plan, template on how to organize yourself to make sure you get out and vote, which we'll be releasing today when this episode comes out. So we'll have that resource available. But for now, we've put out a lot of helpful content on learning about what the heck is on my ballot, or what are words that I keep hearing in the media, what I don't understand what's going on. Check out our page. We have a lot of good, useful content on what to find.
Yeah, and also by the time this comes out, we will be relaunching our merch. We're going to be selling our totes, and we have an Ismaili donor who will be matching all of the purchases. So for every 2 totes purchased, they will match the price of 2 totes. So that's $44 every 2 totes purchased that are going to the Fair Fight Initiative 2020. That works. It's a nonpartisan, non-for-profit organization that is working to fight voter suppression. So it's very in line with the type of work that Ismailis Rise Up is doing in a nonpartisan way, just like us.
And to those people who are listening, who are Ismailis or who are TUT listeners, I wanted to say one thing, and that is to please go out there and vote. As they were saying, this is going to be the most crucial election in history. I know we always say that every 4 years, that is a constant thing, but I mean, look where we are right now. I think we can all agree this is going to be pretty big, and we are living in history, and it's time for us to make it. So for those who are at home, the one thing I ask from you is everybody, regardless of Ismailis or anybody, is to get out your cup, drink your chai, and make sure you go out there and vote. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you guys for really, really helping us. So thank you so much.